Welcome to EduCasts, home of EduCasters. You might think this sounds like old-fashioned 1950s schooling, but actually, positivism is more powerful today than ever before. It just wears a new suit. The modern era of education, the era of No Child Left Behind, NCLB, and the Every Student Succeeds Act ESSA, is the ultimate victory of positivist thinking. In the early 2000s, politicians looked at schools and said, "We are spending billions of dollars. But we don't know what we are getting for it. It's too subjective." So they applied the positivist framework. 1. Standardize the input. Every state must have the exact same standards, Common Core. We need to know exactly what is being taught in every classroom. 2. Standardize the measurement. Every student must take the same high-stakes test. We need objective numbers to compare a kid in Detroit to a kid in San Diego. 3. Accountability. If the numbers don't go up, the school is failing. Fire the principal. Close the school. This is scientific management on steroids. It treats the school system like a giant factory. The teachers are the workers, the students are the products, and the test scores are the quality control report. If you are a teacher today, you live in this positivist reality. You have data walls in your staff room. You have student learning objectives, SLOs, where you predict the percentage of growth a student will demonstrate. You are constantly asked to quantify your impact. Even the way we treat discipline has become positivist. We use positive behavioral interventions and supports, PBIS. We track discipline data. We look for patterns. We try to engineer the environment to produce the desired behavior, quiet hallways, using rewards, tickets, parties, and consequences. It is pure social engineering. Now, before we get to the criticism, we have to admit the positivists have a point. There is a comfort in certainty. There is a justice in objectivity. 1. It exposes inequality. Before we had massive positivist data collection, it was very easy to hide the fact that poor children and minority children were being left behind. A principal could just smile and say, "Our school is doing great." But when the data came out, cold, hard, undeniable numbers, it showed the achievement gap. You couldn't argue with the spreadsheet. Positivism forced America to look at the ugly truth of its educational inequity. 2. It protects against bad teaching. We have all had that fun teacher who told great stories but taught us nothing, or the vague teacher who graded based on whether they liked you. Positivism says, no, it demands rigor. It demands that a grade means something. If a teacher gives everyone an A, but the standardized test shows they can't read, the data exposes the inflation. It keeps the system honest. 3. It works for lower-order skills. If you need to learn the multiplication tables, the state capitals, or the steps of CPR, you don't need a journey of self-discovery. You need direct, efficient, positivist instruction. You need drill, practice, and feedback. There's a reason why the military and medical schools use positivist training methods. When accuracy is life or death, you want the certainty of science. However, if you talk to teachers today, you will hear a deep, exhausted groan when you mention data. Because the backlash against positivism is fierce, and it centers on one main idea, reductionism. Critics argue that positivism takes a human being, a complex, infinite, emotional, spiritual, swirling mess of a human being, and reduces them to a number. 1. The McNamara fallacy. During the Vietnam War, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, a hardcore positivist, obsessed over body counts. He believed that if the number of enemy dead was higher than the number of American dead, we were winning. He had the data. But he was losing the war because he couldn't measure the things that actually mattered: the will of the enemy, the morale of the people, the history of the region. Education has its own McNamara fallacy. We measure what is easy to measure, math scores, reading fluency, and we ignore what is hard to measure, creativity, empathy, resilience, curiosity, civic virtue. Because we can't measure curiosity with a multiple-choice test, we stop teaching it. We narrow the curriculum. We cut art, music, and recess because they don't produce data for the state report card. We end up with students who are excellent at taking tests, but terrible at thinking. 2. The Campbell's Law problem. There is a rule in sociology called Campbell's Law. The more any quantitative social indicator is used for social decision-making, the more subject it will be to corruption pressures, and the more apt it will be to distort and corrupt the social processes it is intended to monitor. In plain English, if you tell a teacher, your job depends on these test scores, the teacher will stop teaching and start teaching to the test. We see this everywhere. Teachers spending months on test prep strategies. Schools pushing bubble kids, the ones just below the passing line, while ignoring the highest and lowest achievers. The data becomes the goal, rather than a measure of the goal. The map replaces the territory. 3. The myth of objectivity. Finally, critics argue that positivism is a lie because education is never neutral. Who writes the test? Who decides what facts are true? Who decides that standard English is the only correct way to speak? When a test question assumes a student knows what a regatta is, it is biased against poor kids who have never seen a boat race. The positivist claims the test is an objective measure of reading, but it might actually be a measure of wealth. By pretending to be value-free, positivism often just enforces the values of the dominant culture. So, where are we now? We are currently in a messy middle ground. Most thoughtful educators have moved into a post-positivist space. This means we still respect science. We still want evidence. We don't want to go back to the days of pure guesswork. We want to know if our reading program actually helps kids read. But we have lost the arrogance of the early positivists. We admit that a classroom is not a sterile laboratory. We admit that a test score is just a snapshot, often a blurry one. We are seeing a rise in qualitative data. This is the attempt to bring the human story back into the numbers. Instead of just a reading score, we want a running record where we listen to the child read and note their frustrations. Instead of just a behavior chart, we want restorative justice circles where we talk about the why behind the behavior. We are moving toward portfolio assessment, where a student shows their growth through actual work, essays, projects, art, rather than just a bubble sheet. This is the attempt to have our cake and eat it too, to have the rigor of science with the heart of humanism. In the end, positivism in education is a reflection of who we are as a modern society. We are a technological, industrial, capitalist society. We value efficiency. We value speed. We value the bottom line. It is no surprise that our schools look like our businesses. We want a return on investment for our tax dollars. We want to be able to rank our schools like we rank our football teams or our stocks. Positivism gives us the tools to do that. But every teacher knows the moment where positivism fails. It fails when you are sitting with a student who has failed every data point, whose IQ score says they shouldn't be able to understand a complex concept, and suddenly, click, the light goes on. They make a connection that isn't on the test. They write a poem that breaks your heart. They show a kindness that can't be quantified. In that moment, the teacher realizes that while positivism is a useful tool for managing a system, it is a terrible description of a human soul. The excellent educator uses the data. They look at the spreadsheets to find the gaps. They use the scientific method to refine their craft. They respect the reality of results. But they never, ever make the mistake of thinking that the data is the child. They know that the most important things in education, the spark of curiosity, the feeling of belonging, the development of character, are the things that will always slip through the net of the positivist's measurement. And they are okay with that mystery, because they know that teaching, at its highest level, is not just a science, it is an art.